Before following along with this video, you need to make sure that you have the TK Infinity Mask panel installed. And in this video, we're going to take a look at how the TK Infinity Mask panel works. The first thing to understand is that the TK Infinity Mask panel is an alternative method for making luminosity masks. The Spectrum and Basic tabs in the TK Actions V4 panel still provide excellent ways to make all kinds of luminosity masks and selections by clicking a single button. I still often find that this is the preferable way for me to quickly make a luminosity selection or mask. The TK Infinity Mask panel allows you to make an infinite number of luminosity masks by changing the tone, range, focus, and strength values and watching the mask change in real time. And in this way, you can customize a mask and more precisely target the tones that you want to adjust. There are three basic steps to using the Infinity Mask panel, and you generally work from the top to the bottom. The first step is to activate the panel by clicking one of the buttons in the top two rows. These buttons generate a new layer that the panel needs in place in order to work. The initial mask is based on the button that you click. The sliders and output buttons don't do anything until one of the top buttons has been clicked and the session has been initiated. The second step is to adjust the mask. The top two rows of buttons and the four sliders can be used to adjust the mask. Each adjustment will change the mask, and the mask updates automatically on screen as adjustments are made. Once you've finished adjusting the mask, output the mask using one of the bottom buttons. Only one output option can be chosen, and once you've output the mask, the layer used to generate the Infinity Mask is deleted and a new Infinity Mask session needs to be started if you want to create another Infinity Mask. If you decide you do not want to use a mask, you can also click the Cancel button to end the Infinity Mask session and delete the extra layer. Note that the panel can only be used on one layer in a single document at a time. Changing layers, images, or history states while an IM session is in progress and then attempting to use the panel generates an error message, like this. When this happens, the Infinity Mask session that was running will automatically be canceled, and the temporary Infinity Mask layer will need to be deleted, and you'll need to start the Infinity Mask session again. The plugin running behind the Infinity Mask panel uses its own recipe for calculating luminosity masks. As a result, the output from the Infinity Mask panel doesn't exactly match the TK Actions V4 panel output, which uses Photoshop calculations. Infinity masks tend to have a little more contrast than the mask calculated by Photoshop. This is generally neither good nor bad, since a user can adjust the mask to suit their needs. The important thing is to choose a starting channel that best defines tonal differences that can be further enhanced. Now let's look more closely at the Infinity Mask panel buttons, starting with the channel buttons at the top. To do this, we'll use a tone gradient. A tone gradient is perfect for visualizing what the different sliders in the Infinity Mask panel do. I recommend doing a lot of practicing with the Infinity Mask panel on a tone gradient like this before you start trying to use it on an image. The chosen button from the top row determines which channel of data will be adjusted by the buttons below. Luminosity loads the luminosity channel, which you don't see in the channels panel, but it has tonal values similar to the RGB channel. The R button loads from the red channel, the G button loads from the green channel, and the B button loads from the blue channel. The saturation button provides an entry point for making luminosity-like masks based on saturation instead of brightness. If you start with the saturation button and then click the Lights 1 button, you'll start with a saturation mask that's similar to the saturation mask that you can generate in the Actions tab of the V4 panel. If you click the saturation button first and then click the Darks 1 button second, then you'll end up with a starting vibrance mask that's similar to the vibrance mask that you can create in the Actions tab of the V4 panel. In addition to adjusting brightness through the saturation and vibrance masks, they can also be used to balance image saturation either through the use of hue saturation adjustment layers or saturation painting, as I show in some of my other tutorials on the V4 panel. Only one channel button choice is allowed at a time. The button will darken when it's the active channel. You can switch to different channel buttons at any time. If the panel is being activated with the click of one of the channel buttons, the initial mask it creates is equivalent to the Lights 1 mask for that channel. So the luminosity button initially creates a Lights 1 mask that's similar to the Lights 1 mask from the RGB channel. The R button creates a Lights 1 mask created from the red channel. The G creates a Lights 1 mask from the green channel, and a Lights 1 mask from the blue channel. We're not seeing any changes in the masks with the tone gradient because it doesn't have any colors in it. So let me cancel this and go to a color image and show that toggling through the different channel buttons can provide a good, quick way to determine which channel is the one that you want to use. The first time a channel button is clicked, the temporary infinity mask layer is generated. This is normally the step that takes the most time, up to a few seconds for a large multi-layered image. Once that layer is in place, the other buttons and sliders will operate much faster. The second row of buttons in the panel are preset buttons, and they can be used to both activate the panel and to set the 4 sliders to preset positions. If a channel has not already been chosen by clicking one of the top row channel buttons, clicking a preset button activates the luminosity channel and sets the 4 sliders to preset positions for that button. If a channel button has already been chosen, the preset button uses the information from that exact channel and simply sets the sliders to the preset positions for that button. The Darks 1 button sets the sliders to show a Darks 1 mask. The slider settings for this are Tone 0, Range 100, Focus 0, and Strength 100. The Lights 1 button sets the sliders to show a Lights 1 mask. The slider presets are Tone 255, Range 100, Focus 0, and Strength 100. The Pick button opens the Photoshop Color Picker dialog to allow the user to make a selection from any area of the image. When you click OK, the tone slider is set to match the tonal value selected by the color picker. Like the Lights 1 and Darks 1 buttons, the Pick button can be used to initiate the Infinity Mask panel even when one of the channel buttons in the top row has not been clicked yet. When this is done, it uses the tonal value from the luminosity channel that is picked from the color picker, and it sets the range to 100, focus to 0, and strength to 100. The 4 sliders and the corresponding input boxes allow you to customize the mask. To use a slider, you just grab the handle and move it left or right, and when you release it, the mask will update in real time. You can also use the input boxes to enter a number to move the slider directly to that value. The tone slider sets the tone. The scale is from 0 to 255, corresponding to the normal grayscale tonal range of Photoshop, with 0 being black and 255 being white. The Pick button is a very easy way to set the tone slider to a specific tonal range within the image, for example, right in the middle. The Range slider sets the range of tones which will be included in the mask. This scale is from 0 to 100. The Range slider determines how far out the tones will feather from the tone that's being selected by the tone slider. With a large range, the tones feather out a lot, and with a small range, the tones feather much less. With a narrow range set, using the tone gradient, it's now easy to see where the tones fall as we move the tone slider. When used in this way, it's similar to using the zone, half zone, and off-center midtone buttons in the Spectrum tab of the V4 panel. It's also worth noting that if you start with either the Darks 1 or Lights 1 mask in the Infinity Mask panel, that moving the range slider will give you the various other dark mask selections or the other various lights series selections. But of course, instead of just having 5 dark series masks and 5 light series masks, you have 100 different range value settings to choose from. The focus slider sets the degree of feathering across the selection line or where the marching ants would appear. Luminosity masks, because of their self-feathering quality, tend to spread adjustments wider than sometimes is desirable. The focus slider adjusts the focus of the transition between the selected tones. Less focus increases the transition, and more focus decreases the transition. So the focus slider determines how quick the transition is, and the range slider determines how far the mask reaches out into other tones around the center tone. The strength slider determines the brightness of the selected tone in the mask. A value of 100 sets the brightness of the selected tone to pure white in the mask. A value less than 100 darkens the selected tone in the mask and makes a proportional adjustment to the other tones included in the mask. A strength setting of greater than 100 allows tones near the selected tone to also start showing as pure white in the mask. The strength slider is generally used to decrease contrast in the mask by darkening the mask in situations where overly aggressive use of the other sliders has led to a mask that has obviously rough transitions. Additionally, if an area of the mask is almost all selected or pure white, increasing the strength can help expand that selection a little further. Once you're satisfied with the mask, the 2 rows of buttons below the sliders provide output options. The output buttons also end the Infinity Mask session and delete the temporary Infinity Mask layer. Once you use an output button, let's say a levels adjustment button, the levels adjustment layer will be created with the mask attached, and the temporary layer will be deleted. The other output buttons are now inactive until another Infinity Mask session is initiated and a new mask is created. Let's say a Darks mask this time. Let's look at what all these output buttons do. The Selection button loads the mask as an active selection. The Apply button applies the Infinity Mask as a layer mask to the layer that was active before the Infinity Mask session was started. In this case, it should be this layer right here. So let's apply. So it applied that new mask to that previous layer. The Pixels button creates a pixel layer of the Infinity Mask. This has some interesting applications, and I'll look at some of those in the next video segment. The Channel button creates a channel mask of the Infinity Mask on the Channels panel. The new channel will be named TK Infinity Mask and is a way to save an Infinity Mask that was created for future use. The Curves button creates a curves adjustment layer with the mask attached. The BC button creates a brightness contrast adjustment layer with the mask attached. The HS button creates a hue saturation adjustment layer with the mask attached. And as we already saw, the Levels button creates a levels adjustment layer with the mask attached. And as we've already seen as well, the Cancel button deletes the temporary layer with no mask output. So that's a quick tour of all the buttons and sliders and what they do. In the next video segment, I'll demonstrate using the TK Infinity Mask to create a mask and make some adjustments on an actual image.